Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode 3 we're up to now, Mark, season 2 of LearnLiveUAE. Really excited to welcome back a guest from season 1, Saran, as well as welcome new guest to the show, James McBlane, Deputy Head BSAC. So we've got 2 educators from Abu Dhabi and one from Dubai on the show, sharing with us this evening about the importance of being a research informed school. But before we delve any further into meeting our guests, Mark, how's your week been?
Really good so far, Ollie. For me, it's Monday, so it's my first day of the week. So I've just been doing a lot of preparation today. Actually, I'm working with the University of Worcester on Friday, and I've got some other work during the course of the week as well. But today I've been sharing things and sort of asking a few people about Twitter, actually, and the power of Twitter. The session I'm running for the PGC students on Friday is exploring how we can use social media to support and help us. Now, I think we're going to have a real life example of that during the show this evening, actually, following a question that Dee posed on Twitter earlier today, actually. So it'd be really good to sort of walk the walk as well as talk the talk when it comes to that sort of thing. Last week was really good for me. How have things been with you, Ollie? You're really busy.
Yeah, really good. We're week 2 now of term. We're still in the Middle East distance learning for secondary students, whilst also having a blended approach for primary students. So schools are a strange place at the moment. It feels empty and full at the same time, which is a really strange thing to try and wrap your head around, because you want the secondary students to be in, really. We've adopted a flexi working approach for our staff in secondary, so they can work in the location that suits them best, whether that means coming to school or working from home. But on the whole, really good. Yeah, we've just kind of launched with our middle leaders a curriculum plan, which we're kind of delving into, which is really interesting to be a part of and help shape and guide where we want to go as a school. So yeah, really, really busy, but I enjoy being busy because that's, nature of the job, I think. Love of learning as an educator and just cracking on.
Yeah, every day's a learning day, as they say. That's right, isn't it, Ollie?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to steal the tagline.
Welcome to all of our viewers as well. Big shout out and welcome to Ben Rothwell, who's already said hello in the live chat of our YouTube. We're live tonight on both YouTube and Periscope, so please do feel free. And thank you to Niall Statham as well, who's joining us too. Welcome to you both and everyone who's viewing, whether you're live or whether you're part of the audience who watches after the show. Please know you're very, very welcome. If you're watching us live, our focus this evening is to think about why it's important to be a research-informed school. And our guests this evening are James McBlane, as Ollie said, from BSAC, and we've got Saran from Dubai College as well. Really interested to hear from them about their approaches in their school. And as we said to them both before we came live, we're looking to try and catch them in, to try and unpick some of the great practices going on in their schools as part of the UAE Research sort of network. So shall we bring our guests in, Ollie? Should we do that?
Yes, let's do it.
People don't come to hear from us, do they? So let's bring the guests in.
Hi, good evening.
Welcome, James. And welcome, Dee.
Evening.
How are you, James? How are you doing? Are you okay? How's the start of term been for you at BSAC?
I think Ollie summed it up pretty well at the start there. It's been strange. My 19th year now as an educator, and this is a unique set of circumstances and challenges. We are in Abu Dhabi in a different situation to Dubai. We're still distance learning, so we've gone in with a 100% live Zoom at the moment. All staff teaching from school, all students following the timetable. And really the reason for that, and that's a slightly different approach to the one we took last term, when we're a little bit more flexible with that, is we're very much tapering up now to getting the students back. So it's very much about structure and routine. So the first week went very well. We survey students at the end of the week. And the feedback from the students was incredibly positive, even about routine and getting up early. So good so far, but we're at the beginning of a year that I think is going to throw up more twists and turns and more challenges along the way. So it's just keeping that positive mindset and that sense of humor and that flexibility as we move on, because it's start the second week, and I'm looking at the time here. If I knew we were starting at 8 o'clock, it's past my bedtime, I might have said no.
Oh dear. How about yourself, Dee? How are things going at Dubai College?
Yeah, they're busy. It's really good to be back in school. It's very, it's different in Dubai. Obviously, we're open. Secondary school students are back in as well. So, the buzz around the campus is just lovely. We've really missed it. It felt like a ghost town before. So I think in that sense, the students are really happy to be back, and we're really happy to see them. I think for us, the challenge is slightly different now, because we've got a couple of year groups that are sort of 50% in and 50% out. So we're just sort of navigating our way through this, I guess, blended hybrid approach, where we've got half of the class in front of us, half of them at home, and just trying to work out some methods of, giving them the best, which everybody is trying their best, but it's, every lesson is in a different room because of the dynamics, or the size of the classroom is dictated by the sort of 1.5 meter rule. But nonetheless, I think, teachers are amazing, and our staff have shown so much sort of resilience throughout the first week. It was, definitely different. It was difficult. But as each week goes on, just like with distance learning, I think it will get better, and we'll be sharing lots of nuggets of best practice. So hopefully that'll keep us going. But yeah, it's definitely different. I haven't got 19 years under my belt like James, but yeah, it's certainly a challenge.
Slip that one in.
But it's a much larger combined total, so that's something to sort of think about positively. Do you want to jump in on around a topic, Ollie? Do you want to jump in with the first question and choose who to pose it to?
Sure. Yeah. So the first question that we wanted to ask you both really was, but we'll go James first. Why is it important that you identify yourselves as research-informed schools?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if it is necessarily important to identify or to label or name yourself as a research-informed school. I think it's more about what the value of taking that particular approach is. So that very much is what has driven us as a school, is what does being research-informed, what does being evidence-based mean? And I think what it means is that our teachers are more reflective about their practice. They're more informed about decisions they make in terms of their pedagogy, and how they might try to change and progress in their practice in the classroom. And it's about that culture that develops around all of those aspects. So it's not kind of a badge or a label that has a value on its own. But what I think it does do is it pays homage to what we believe are really important benefits of being research informed as a profession, as practitioners in the classroom, as leaders making decisions, as we just talked about, in challenging circumstances. And I think you're better placed and you're more effective when you listen to and you draw upon and you contextualize that research and that evidence base to drive your practice in the classroom, to inform your decision making as a leader. And it's really that value rather than the label that I think is important.
Yeah, there's sorry, Mark.
Go on.
No,
I was going to say, you were talking before, right at the beginning, James, about how this at the start of this year, you're sort of focusing on things like structure and boundaries and all those sort of things. And there's research which actually backs up that really well. And children do respond well to clear boundaries. And we know that as parents. We also know that as professional teachers as well. And so it helps you when you do have to have those conversations, I find. Actually, if you can reference the research that backs up the decision making, so it isn't just that gut feeling that you're sharing with a parent when they question why you're doing what it is that you're doing that's helpful as well. Dee, what about yourself? Sorry, James. Sorry.
No, I was going to say just very briefly, sorry to cut across you, exactly that. If we think about the current situation we're in, when we're looking at synchronous versus asynchronous learning, when we're looking at pastoral care and supporting students' well-being during this time, when we're looking at structure and routines, there is research out there that could point you in the right direction. So we're all making decisions in uncharted territory, but that doesn't mean that we need to throw darts blindfolded and see what we hit. I think we can draw upon that evidence base effectively, and they are the kind of things that are informing this decision making. It isn't just in the kind of normal run of things when everything's stable and the sun is shining. It's in these difficult times. So I think it's not a fair weather thing. It's an approach that is actually serving us well now in the situation we're in.
No, I agree. Dee, as a geographer, with all these sort of weather-related analogies that James is playing there with the uncharted territories, and but actually, what I sort of flip the same question for you, really, but linking to what James has said, actually, with the research, it is like giving us a map to actually help us along with our journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with research, there's always a piece of research which will support your argument. There's so much research out there. You can always pin a piece of research to what you sort of want to argue. I think the key is context, as James mentioned. I think that's the difference. I think when we talk about sort of research-informed schools, there's engagement in research, and then there's engagement with research. So I think, they're two very different things, but I think the main thing and the main reason why we're sort of passionate about it is because it's quite empowering. So many decisions as educators are sort of taken out of your hands, and we're in such a changeable context. So I think when you're involved in research, or when you're using research which is specifically aligned to your context, it can be really empowering to actually use that to make decisions. Otherwise, you can be relying on, oh, this worked in my last school, or I think this is a great idea, let's try it, based on what, And I think just taking pulse data, I think being data rich, making decisions based on data from your own school is really, really important to make authentic decisions. And I think it helps with change management as well. We talk a lot at DC, particularly at leadership level, about the theory of action and, why you're doing particular things and how the students should be at the forefront of all of the decision making. And I think really that complements being evidence informed and research informed. You try things, you adapt, you learn, and it comes back to being reflective. As James mentioned, you're constantly reflecting on your practice, your leadership decisions, and I think that's really healthy, and it's great modeling for the students as well, and for the staff, that actually leaders, we can change course if we need be. It's not that we're going to stick to a particular decision, if the evidence suggests otherwise.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dee. Sticking with you for a second, Dee, we know the importance of connecting and collaborating within and across education, but education in the UAE particularly is a really pretty competitive sort of marketplace. How did speaking about the UAE Research Schools Network, how did it come about, and who sort of broke the glass ceiling with that when it all sort of started off?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of behind the scenes collaboration. Like James and I are often on the phone, similar with the not-for-profit groups and the British schools in Dubai. I think it's been brewing for a while. It came about actually after the Research Ed conference, which was held a couple of years back at DC. And you must have heard of the sort of Research Schools Network in the UK. So the school that I was at prior to coming out here was a teaching school, which was aligned with Cambridge University in this project called the Super Project, which was all about sort of evidence-informed practice. And we were working with research schools, amazing schools like Sandringham, Durrington. So really I had this sort of vision of a similar type of collaboration. And by chance, we did a call for schools at the end of the conference, just to say, look, is anybody else interested? We'd love to form a network. And luckily, we had a core of us that were really passionate about it. And we kept it quite tight and small to begin with. So we've got Kings, El Barsha, we've got Victory Heights, DC, obviously, and BZAC. And it will probably grow. But at the minute, you know, we were hit by COVID. James and I were talking about this earlier, just before we went live, and so many things we had lined up in the pipeline, which you know, we'll talk about. But there's lots of things we had ready to go, you know, for schools across the region, really, as far as the Middle East, as well as another Research Ed conference, which you must have seen. Like, we had some great names like Mary Myatt, Paul Kirshner out to speak about, you know, cognition. But, you know, when things normalize, we will resume. But, you know, there was definitely collaboration going on prior, but there was a call for speakers, and we've been working in the background and working on making partnerships. So James will probably be able to talk to you about David Pedder and the links with Emirates College, and also we've linked up with Cambridge University, Cambridge Oracy, because we've got a big focus this year on oracy and metacognition, following on for some action research that we've done. So yeah, that's where it was sort of born out of. But I think this whole idea of competition, I mean, come on, in a climate like this, if we can't all come together and help each other to get the best for the students, I think there's something wrong with education.
No, absolutely. Mark Ryan's joining us, actually. He's just put a comment in and shared that partnerships are key to building a successful school community. And it goes to that. And again, there's research support from the likes of Hattie and Education Endowment Foundation about the importance of relationships. And that's key, not just for schools and parents and pupils, but also among ourselves as well. I think it's been a real hallmark of the strength of the profession, actually, particularly under lockdown, where schools have really come together and actually, you know, worked really closely together to help make things work, which is why that call out that you put earlier on Twitter, I'm really hoping we can get some comments and feedback on that as well, Dee. Do you want to jump on to the next question, Ollie?
Yeah, sure. I just want to pick up on a sort of thread there about educators and identifying. You know, many educators identify being research informed or evidence based as being or associating it with being kind of traditional teaching values rather than being progressive. What do you both think about that as a paradigm, and how do you think that it relates to, you know, the education or the purpose of education in general?
Do you want me to start with that? I think it's not particularly helpful. I think Tom Sherrington writes very well about this, and I think it's essentially a caricature of two positions that I don't think any educator really falls into fully. What I do think, though, is that when you're evidence informed, you look at the balance of the evidence. The weight of the evidence that exists at the moment is in favor of direct instruction. It's in favor of a knowledge-rich curriculum. And it doesn't support some of the more progressive ideas that you might term like discovery learning. So I think that's where that kind of idea arises from, that it's a more traditional approach. I would eschew both sides of that and say it's just about good teaching. And I think what Dee said earlier is entirely correct. It's about being a reflective practitioner. It's about looking at the evidence of what could work, what might work, and then it's trying it, adapting it, and becoming a better practitioner. I do think the weight of the evidence is on the side that you might call more traditional. But I don't think it's particularly helpful to try to label it in that way.
That's a really good point there, James. Could I just unpick, or could we try and unpick, how do you go about building in time for reflection? Schools are naturally quite busy places, and for things to be successful, you want the opportunity for reflection at every level. How have either of you gone about that in your schools?
Well, through professional learning days, I think that's, I think those are key. Obviously, they are standalone days, but I think, there is the temptation to fill those days with just stuff and more training. Whereas I think we've taken the approach where we've given staff time and departments time to sort of talk about lesson study, talk in their triads, really develop some ideas. We've also got things like pedagogues, which is like lunch and learn, where we've got just, things that are relevant to what we're driving in regards to teaching and learning, and staff can just come and have some lunch, talk informally, there's no pressure. And they can just chat about teaching and learning and pedagogy and what they're finding tricky or what they've learned. So, I think there are snippets. We've also got like a Sunday meeting slot, which is like our PD afternoon, if you like. And then because of the digital revolution now, we've also got a channel within Teams, which is solely dedicated to professional learning. So we've got an online Spark channel, and it's so easy, isn't it, just to record a screencasting for like 2 or 3 minutes, ping it onto the team and say, watch this, this is an idea I've got. So in terms of reflection, it's not bound to the school hours. When you're busy and you're teaching 7 lessons in a day, actually it's nice to just, go home, have a look at things in your own time. So I think in some ways, going digital has really revolutionized that, and I can see that happening and only improving things.
It makes it so much easier to facilitate those sort of things happening as well. The technology sort of serves that. You can quickly record yourself. It's saved through into Microsoft Stream. You can even make little sort of dedicated playlists on certain topics, can't you? And it makes it really bite-sized and far more accessible. Even for sort of those of different languages, it can translate from English into Arabic and all these different things as well. It's just absolutely amazing what is possible now. Dee, you mentioned some work that you're doing, James, with the Emirates College. Would you like to expand a little bit about what Dee was talking about there and share what's happening there?
Yeah, so I think a key part of becoming a research school is being able to bridge the gap between academic research and the classroom. So really what we focused on was developing partnerships with working active academic researchers in the field. So we've been very fortunate that there is an outstanding academic. He's come from the UK. He was previously at Cambridge and then Dean of Education at Leicester. He's now at the Emirates College of Advanced Education as the Vice Chancellor there. His name's Professor David Pedder, and we were able to make contact. He was incredibly enthusiastic about striking up a relationship with the school initially in terms of developing active research support and partnerships with the school, and also has been very generous in terms of guiding us, setting up and developing this school's network as well. And Dee mentioned the super group back in Cambridge that she was involved in. He was involved in the founding stages of that. So he's incredibly valuable and has been absolutely fantastic in the support he's offered. He has come into school, he's delivered research skills workshops, He has partnered our staff up with researchers in the field and expertise who've guided them through master's degrees, research, and also general practitioner research. We've got a number of projects that were in the pipeline that have been delayed and postponed because of the situation, but hopefully we'll get those back up and running. And it's about that active research, joint research, which is partnered between researchers in universities and teachers actually in the classroom. And I think that is what is genuinely exciting, because there's a continuum from being research informed, is that you pick up that information, you use it to guide you, all the way to being an active researcher yourself. And we've got staff all the way along that continuum. For me, that is the exciting end of things, though. It's that active engagement in research and the ability to do that in your own context, but also to share that and have that support and guidance from experts in the field. It's just been absolutely fantastic. So we've been very fortunate with this partnership, and in fact have a call with David tomorrow to look at the next phase and how we adapt things with the situation we're in at the moment.
That's really powerful. So one of the questions that we've got as our set of questions tonight is ones we sort of ask about success stories, and that sounds like a real sort of success story in and of itself. But across all those different bits of action research that have been taking place, is there any sort of success stories, one or two you could sort of single out to share with us that have been particularly impactful, interesting?
The clear success story that kind of matches with the pattern that I was talking about there is the work that we've been doing around lesson study. And actually it's our former deputy head, Alan McCarthy, deputy head of primary, who led a lesson study program across the primary school. He was guided by David Pedder and Peter Dudley at the World Association for Lesson Study, and was able to carry out a series of documented research activities involving lesson study, and was able to write that up in a joint paper with the university as well. And now Alan's gone, so Alan's moved on. He's now primary principal at Alice Smith in Kuala Lumpur, but he's left behind a team of really enthusiastic and engaged lesson study experts and converts in the primary school. We've got a year leader, I think year 3 leader, who's picking that up and is continuing that work with David and looking at the next phase of that. So what's great about that story, I think, is you've got all of the elements of engaging a number of staff across the school in a structured bit of research. You've got that support from outside. You've got it leading to a paper which is published and shared, and it's also sustainable. We've got it carried on now by different people in a different way, taking it in a different direction. So I think in terms of the success and what you would hope to see is real pockets of this happening across the school.
That's really exciting and really empowering for not only you, I guess, leading on the project, but also for everyone, all the stakeholders that were involved in all stages of that. It must be so good.
Yeah.
Have you got any success stories you can share of a similar nature from your work at Dubai College, Dee?
Yeah, so I guess our sort of journey began about 4 years ago, and we recruited a specific person to actually drive action research at the school in the first year. That was Alan Crawford, and he was the SLE, Specialist Leader of Education in action research. And I think what we achieved in the first year, we got 25 staff across the college. That's nearly a quarter engaged in action research. Looking at a problem, looking at an issue in their classroom, and being really passionate about sharing their research process. And Alan did a series of sessions with them about how to conduct action research. He was fresh out of doing his MA at Cambridge, so he was really enthusiastic about it. And we had a lovely sharing and celebration with research posters at the end of that year. And for us, it's really evolved. I think one of the things we realized in the first year was it's quite time consuming doing research. And I think that's one of the things as teachers that we probably have to accept and realize it may not be achievable for everybody. So in our second year, we had our SLEs in like digital, oracy, Harkness doing the research. Some of them were doing masters, some of them action research. And I think the research that came out of that year was pinnacle in making us change our strategic decision making. So Jerry, our digital skills SLE, he did some research on sensory tech, as well as going completely digital at Key Stage 3. And because of his research, we decided, ironically, although not relevant now, not to go completely digital because of the impact on boys' attainment. And similarly with sensory tech, we decided it wasn't necessarily effective at Key Stage 4. With the oracy, we saw some great Harkness lessons spread across the school in terms of participation. Sarah wrote her MSc based on that. That's shared. She's now set up the Oracy Hub, which is now going to sharing best practice across the UAE. So, and similarly with the metacognition, we've partnered with James Mannion at Cambridge to basically look at best practice, and our PD at the beginning of the year was focused on that. But similar to James, on the pastoral side, our two head of positive education have also been working with Dr. Louise Lambert. Don't know if you've heard of her. She's really, doing some really amazing work across the Middle East with her PPI interventions. And Sheridan and Mark have also had publications published in research journals regarding the impact of that work. So, I think I think that's lots to celebrate in regards to, official publications, strategic decisions being made as a result of research, but also just staff being able to solve issues within their classroom on an action research level. I think that's really the key, isn't it? Like, this is what's happening in my classroom and I want to solve that issue, and I'm going to try these things and evaluate and change. And similar to James, we've also adopted lesson study after lots of discussions with David Pedder that James mentioned. And it's been really powerful just in terms of collaboration and teacher efficacy. So yeah, lots of good things. It's hard to pick one, sorry.
We could just bring up a comment here, Mark, if that's all right. We've had another comment from Mark Ryan about the importance of empowering your staff and leaving a legacy. It's great to hear all of the different projects that you've got going on at both of your schools, and I'm sure the same is going on at the other two schools within the group. You've both mentioned as well within that, really importantly, a deep understanding and awareness of context. So if with that in mind, each school in the group obviously has its own idiosyncrasies and in its own context. How do you make sure that the work that you do across the group is clearly communicated and can be transferred across to everybody?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and we had quite long and detailed conversations about this across the group. And I think we came to the conclusion that what we needed was a lot of flexibility to allow schools to adapt to their own context and do what was working for them. We also were working towards some common areas of research that could extend across the schools. So that was essentially, I think, our next phase. So this was kind of the point we were at when things shut down. What we were essentially doing was firming up the foundations in the 4 schools. And it was not so much about making things work across the schools, it was about a common philosophy. And we had the common philosophy, and what we wanted to do was really for each of the schools to develop that culture as fully as possible, and then to look at opportunities for shared themes, shared research, and I think that would be really powerful. But to answer the question, really, it was about giving room to each other to take things in your own direction, and then looking for those natural opportunities to go across and between the schools when the time arose. And I think we'll get there. But I think what we also need to do is keep that flexibility, because I think that is the right model. Dee's doing some fantastic things. Ben and Mike at Victory Heights and Kings are doing some fantastic things as well. So we wouldn't want anything to get in the way of that. That would be completely the kind of wrong way to look at this. So I think hopefully we'll get that balance right as we continue to grow and develop.
I think also we were just moving before the summer about talking about outreach work for other schools, because we've had quite a lot of interest from other schools in the UAE saying, look, we're really keen. We want to take a similar approach. Can you take us through your journey? Can you do some CPD on how you get started? And I think that's another area that once, I keep saying things settle down. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but once we are allowed some flexibility of going into schools or doing things online, I think that's one of the things the group is keen to do, because we've been on separate journeys, and Ben's primary, and Mike's at a through school. So yeah, we've all got some great nuggets with slightly different contexts, which I think would be useful for schools and practitioners. And even if you're not a leader, maybe you're just a teacher who's really keen and doesn't know where to find sort of evidence-informed resources just to help with their teaching and learning. So that's definitely on the cards. But I think at the minute we're in the midst of online / blended learning pandemonium.
We had quite a lot put on ice. We were literally we'd already launched and advertised our offering of the Charter College C-Teach program, which was the first time that this was being delivered outside the UK. The whole program is set up to encourage and provide the skills for teachers to become research informed and engaged in their practice. And that was really exciting. We were on the way with that, and that was part of that outreach and sharing across the UAE and the region. But as we know, the situation's taken a turn and things have gone on ice, but things will turn around again, and I think we'll re-engage with all that stuff. And I'm excited. I was very excited at the time about the way things were coming together, and I'm still excited. I'm just going to have to wait a little while until we re-engage with them.
Well, every threat comes opportunity, doesn't it, James? I just want to link into the things you've both been saying, really, because whilst things are on ice, teachers are still keen to learn more. Linking on to what you were, you've seen the questions as well, Dee, anyway, but linking on to what you were saying before, Dee, have you got any advice from yourself as well, James, about sort of the pitfalls teachers should be mindful of when they come to thinking about implementing research practices in the classroom? If I just jump into, I've got a pile of books next to me. So I've got this book here, field book. Yep. I've got my Visible Learning Guide to Student Achievement. I've got What Works. I've got How Learning Happens. I've got How to Enhance Learning and Teaching with Technology. I've got Visible Learning Insights. I've got Connect the Dots. I've got What We Need to Learn About Psych. The list carries on. I've got a few books, as you can see. But, books in education are big business, and teachers read books all the time. And as every book has always got some fantastic advice in it, and there's always great nuggets you can take away to use in your own classroom and all these sort of things. But with every sort of opportunity, again, flipping it on itself, there's a threat there as well. Have either of you got, so a question to both of you, advice about things to be mindful of, practical advice for the pitfalls you might encounter when you try and just cherry pick something from Dido's whatever?
I think that's the first one. Don't start that way round. Don't pick up a book, sounds interesting, read it, and think about how do I apply that to my own practice. What you've got to start with is that reflection on your own practice. what do I need to focus on? In what way do I need to improve? What are the challenges that I'm experiencing that's going to help me to improve? And then you go out and you engage purposefully with the research. Picking up books and cherry picking and working the wrong way round, I think, is the biggest pitfall and probably the biggest and most common mistake that teachers make. So you pick a stack of books like that. I'm going to engage with research. I'm going to become research informed, and you basically cherry pick an idea and you crowbar it into your practice, whether that is what you need to be thinking about or not. So I think that's the biggest pitfall. You demonstrated pretty well with your pile of books there.
Yeah, I think just patching in on that, I think you can become very overwhelmed by some of these books, and some of them are very sort of academic, and it's great if you're that way inclined and you can translate that into your practice. But I think the books that are really probably more relevant are those that translate the research and say what it looks like in the classroom. So, you know, for example, I'm going to show my stack now. You've got Carl Hendricks's book. I think this is one of probably the most I can't even say it. It was transformative in our practice or in teachers' practice, because they basically took nuggets of research and they said what it would look like in the classroom. And I think there is a danger, and I know we faced it sometimes at college when you're working with academics, where it can get too academic, and teachers just need to hear, what does this look like in the classroom? You know, how can I use this, and how can it best impact on the students? I think another really good one is this one, impact.
Yeah.
You know, it's really transferable. It's written by teachers who are passionate about research, and we've worked with the Chartered College to get a subscription across our 4 schools, which has been really popular in take up. So this one is available digitally. So if you're starting somewhere, and they're really nice because they're themed. I'm not paid by the Chartered College, by the way. I'm not taking any commission, but you know, they've got a series on assessment, they've got a series on cognition, and it's just, you know, really short snippets. The other place to look at is the research ed books that have come out. They're sort of snippets and short condensed versions of what's out there. But, you know, I think it's what you're interested and passionate about. What is your school driving in terms of teaching and learning? And, you know, how does that translate into the classroom? That, for me, is the most important thing. Because if it's not transferable and you don't know how to put it into practice, then what's the point?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And so Ollie, I'm sure will agree with me as well. We're both fans of the Chartered College. We're both founding fellows, in fact, of the Chartered College, and big fans. Somebody who's watching, Dee, has asked, what book is that? And I think they're talking about Carl's book. Could you just pop it up again? I did try and reply to them, but I think it failed. But it's his book, What Does It Look Like in the Classroom? And yeah.
What does this look like in the classroom? And they basically interviewed a range of, I guess, academics, you would say, on things like, they've got a section from Dylan Williams on assessment, and they give a short blurb about what the research says, but then the rest of the section is all about how can you actually put these strategies in place in the classroom. And there's questions from different practitioners which are probably transferable to lots of different contexts, and they look at themes like motivation, questioning, the learning myths, which we know is, you know, really good book. So I think if you're going to start somewhere, you know, Robin was on with us last time. This is a good place to start if you want to engage with research, and also the impact. The impact, it's definitely a good transferable read, and it's not overwhelming.
Can I just jump in again a second, Ollie? Sorry, just on this topic, because I see lots of teachers sharing about their reading they're doing. Social media, particularly Twitter. I worry that because teachers do suffer massively from imposter syndrome, and they feel like if they're not actually, doing the latest thing or reading the latest book, and sort of we got onto this topic a little bit now, but there's always that sort of FOMO thing, that fear of missing out. And, oh, crikey, well, I haven't got the latest book of, or I'm not doing the latest bit of research in. And how can we support each other within the education community and then ultimately within our schools to ensure that our teachers don't sort of get overwhelmed? Because I'm guilty. I mentioned I'm doing a session on Friday at University of Worcester to sort of 360 PGCE students about the power of edu-Twitter. Well, the fear there is that they're going to rush out, go on Twitter, think, oh, I'm going to be a rubbish teacher now. I can't do this at all. And how can we balance that at all? What do you think, James?
I don't fully get the question. Sorry, I get the sentiment of what you're saying. What are we looking to balance?
We want our colleagues to go on social media, onto Twitter, and share as part of the professional learning network and all the rest of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge advocate for it, but I think there's a potential, if you will, for people to feel like they're inadequate when they compare themselves to what they're seeing and reading from other educators. What can we do to support our colleagues when they're engaging in this sort of sharing and so that they don't feel like they're inadequate compared to others, and they can make these things sort of work make these things they're seeing work within their school and their classroom? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, I think it does.
Sorry, sketchy question. Sorry.
I think it's about encouraging people to be realistic. I think this is a much wider question. It's a much wider question. Lots of aspects, but I think it's about encouraging people to be realistic about what their capabilities are, and that we've mentioned time already. That I think is the biggest challenge in all of this. We linked up with the Teacher Development Trust. They came out to look at our setup, and the feedback from staff was incredibly positive. But the thing that came through for that was time for reflection and collaboration. So time is and the demands of teaching, and particularly at the moment, is very tough for teachers. And I think it's that challenge. It's about being realistic with what you can do in the time that you have. And I think comparing to others and books they've read it's one of those. I've read lots of half books, and whether I dip in, dip out, and it's are they reading all of those books, and what is the need to put it on Twitter at the rate some people seem to be reading? So it's a little bit of realism, I think.
I think also if you're judging yourself with someone on Twitter, it's just you're probably it's probably not the right thing to do. I think there are a lot of people with a lot of time on Twitter who dedicate their whole career or their whole sort of perception of what they want to put out there. And I think put that on the side. I think it's definitely, what do they call it, hootagogy, a great place to find some training and some ideas. But I think the most important thing is, I think, having a team of practitioners within school that can translate this down for staff. Not every member of staff is going to have time to read 5 or 6 books. And I think as leaders, and we've got like an innovation action team, there's 5 of us in the SLEs, we sometimes take those books, we take those nuggets and we translate them into like a pedagogue lunch session, or like a nice, easy translatable poster, which has like the highlights. I think that's something as a school, if you can do that for your staff. We also have in the staff room a massive CPD library, which, interestingly is quite sparse at the minute, which is great. I hope the books come back. But I think in the midst of the summer and people staying, people have picked up things because they've got time. But don't judge yourself on people what people are doing on Twitter. I think just, if you're a leader in a school, try and work on making it transferable and translatable to staff in small chunks that are, again, applicable in the classroom.
Speaking of books, actually, that's also good. I found that the Inner Drive book, it takes the research and pares it down to really easy. The lovely little infographics inside the book makes it so much more easily accessible for people to sort of translate it into things that they can do. Ollie, I'm just going to disappear after that question there. So you can carry on.
I just want to sort of add to that. I think it is massively important that, one of the big, or two of the big things that everyone's talked about is time and reflection. And it's about appreciating your own capacity, isn't it? And actually, you need to switch off at the end of the day and not think about school for a little bit. And you shouldn't be at home thinking, I need to read the rest of this to keep up with other people. A question then, which piece of educational research has resonated with your own practice most, and why? And I'm happy for either of our guests to answer.
Yeah, I'll go first with that one. I think the bit of research that's had the biggest impact on my practice is Vivienne Robinson and her work around instructional leadership. I think that made me reflect very deeply on my own leadership, and 4 or 5 years ago, significantly changed my practice. The second book and bit of research was by, not an educator, but from Harvard Business School, a guy called Edgar Schein, on developing culture within organizations. And I think I read that around the same time. And I think those two things certainly made me reflect and made me change the way I approach leadership very, very significantly.
I think I'm going to copy James. Vivienne also has been quite instrumental in terms of a leadership perspective. I'm going to go old school. I just love Dylan Williams. I think he is one of the ones, when I was doing my PGCE with the black box and assessment, and with everything going on, I just keep coming back to that. Everything on formative assessment, I think it's such a solid piece, and the things that he comes out with, I know he's controversial. I quite like that sometimes, but I think the things that he comes out with, his website, he shares everything. It's completely accessible. I think there's something to be said about that. The other one for me is Neil Mercer. And his work on cognition and oracy and how we bring meta talk together. And another fan of Professor Rose Luckin, who was at the at the conference last year. I've really immersed myself in her work for our digital strategy. Mark will know, keep going on about how the learning acts have basically informed our digital strategy and helped me as a leader who has taken on digital learning to just navigate through. And all of her work through Educate at UCL has been really good. And yeah, I'm biased because I'm from there, but I think generally the leadership stuff that comes out of UCL as well with Peter Early and Toby Greenbury, I think his name is, they've got some really good books James and I use in the MPQSL when we co-facilitate. So yeah, there's lots, but there's lots of faddy stuff out there as well. I think that's the thing to also be, there's a lot of people that are writing a lot of books. And I think it's also something, maybe slightly controversial, but just because it's in a book doesn't necessarily mean there's an evidence base. And that's why I think it's important that bridge that James was talking about between the academic and the practitioner is really important. And I think for me, it's those sorts of practitioners or those sorts of books and that sort of research which is important.
That's a great answer, Dee. Thank you. That sort of goes back to what I was sort of trying to interweave into that question before, because it is really difficult to unpick what good one looks like and how it should actually be interpreted and all those different things. So listen, thank you both very much for joining us on the show this evening. Ollie, did we have any more questions? I think we've sort of gone through and covered everything. There was another question about your sort of favorite researchers, but you kind of covered that as well with some of the things that you come out with in your responses. It's been a real delight having the opportunity to chat with you both. So we talked before, but lovely to have a chance to meet and chat with yourself as well, James. Thank you both so much for coming on the show this evening. We've had some lovely comments throughout the show. I think this is Sarah Mullin, who was on the show with us last week. And I can see the avatar more clearly. I can see her book cover on the front there. So thank you to Sarah for joining us. Mark Ryan has been joining us and saying a whole bunch of things throughout the show. Thank you for that. Saying what an amazing chat. Well done, everybody. Niall Stutton has been involved and been saying stuff all the way through as well. So thank you so much to our audience for joining us this evening as well. We'll be back next week. We're doing an announcement as well, and this is an open invitation. I'm not sure if Ollie's mentioned this to either of you, but we're holding our own Teaching and Learning and Leadership event on the 16th of October. If either of you would like to join us for a session, that sounds like we're asking you for a drink. If you'd like to join us to deliver a session at the event, we'd be absolutely delighted to have you join us. But we've shared on the show that we're going to announce a speaker each week. And so it was interesting that you mentioned the tie-in with King's Al-Barsha, because we're really pleased to announce that Russell Smart will be joining us as one of our speakers at the event. So please do keep that date free in your diary. On the 16th of October, we're really looking forward to having the event and doing all of that and sharing that as a space and a place for educators across the region. Ollie, did you want to share anything else this evening?
Yeah, could we just get the presentation up and share slide 6? I'm just sneakily do it behind the scenes whilst you were talking, but I shared. So I just wanted to highlight to everyone, if you are interested in the work that the UAE Research Schools Network are doing, you can follow them on Twitter. This is just a screen capture of their Twitter profile at UAE Research SCH1. And they do share loads of great nuggets and pearls of wisdom and resources on there. So please do follow that account to delve a little bit further into what the network are actually up to. And I'd just like to say, as we've already done, a massive thank you to both Dee and James for tonight's discussion. It's been really, really brilliant.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Yeah, really enjoyed it both. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.